Oh my goodness. Good evening, everyone. I'm a little out of breath. But thank you all for coming. And I was walking through Schmeeckle Reserve just now, and I noticed something that shook me a little bit. But I noticed that some of the trees, some of my favorite trees in the reserve, moved away. And I'm not really sure why. I'm not sure how. They didn't even send me a forwarding address. So I'm pretty stumped on where they went. But as I was walking through, I was so frazzled at the time that I ran back and I forgot to check if my favorite tree was still there. So if it's okay with everyone, would you be willing to go check if my favorite tree is still there? Yeah? Okay, so before we get started, this will be an hour-long program, and we are going to walk about 1.5 miles through the trails of Schmeeckle. We'll be on the trails the whole time, so don't worry about it, unless I say otherwise for 2 volunteers. But we'll get to that. And so you can all stand up and follow me. We're going to head out this way.
That was me. Yeah, you. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for coming to check, and this is Mr. Maple. I'm so glad he is still here. I knew that he would have sent me a forwarding address if he moved away. And me and him just have such a budding relationship. He's the best. So my name is Quinn. I have worked here at Schmeeckle Reserve for about the last 2 years, and me and Mr. Maple over here have become quite friends over that time. I'm also a naturalist here at Schmeeckle in the practicum class. And so, I'd like to start off with a story about my childhood home. So I'm originally from Pewaukee, Wisconsin. It's around the Waukesha, Milwaukee area, if any of you know it. So it's a fairly urban area. And so there's going to be some walkers coming through. We'll just be respectful of them. And so, since I'm in an urban area, we don't have a lot of space in our yards. You can come on through. Thank you. But we don't have a lot of space in our yards, but my yard has about 1 acre of land. So not huge. I know some of you are probably thinking, I got cabins up north that are like 400 acres. I don't know. So not huge, but there's definitely enough space where there's quite a few trees in my yard. And so I was going to talk to you about 2 of those trees. One of those trees was a box elder tree. And what was special to me about that box elder tree was I had this rebound net for soccer. I used to be a soccer player. And what I would do is I would flip that soccer rebound net down, and I would kick footballs over the net and into that tree. I was pretty good at it. That was my field goal. And I would kick that over and over. I don't think I ever got a football stuck, so that was nice. That tree was pretty forgiving. But my other favorite tree was a black walnut tree. And so that tree was about 60 feet tall, straight as an arrow. So for any of you that know lumber prices, that's worth a pretty penny. And I had so many good memories with that tree. You can come on through. And the memories that I had with that tree were mostly the black walnuts that fell from that tree. And my dad would always get mad about running those black walnuts over with the lawnmower. And he would tell us, you boys go out and pick up all the black walnuts. Well, it was towards the end of fall when we were doing this, so we would pick them up, put them into paper bags, and they were always those black, mushy black walnuts. They would stain your hands green, they smelled weird, and we would keep them in the basement. Those bags of just black walnuts, we'd keep them in the basement. And my mom was always like, oh, of course we're gonna make a pie out of the black walnut seeds. I was like, what does that taste like, Mom? But anyway, that tree also had my mom's clothesline on it. Me and my brother would slackline from tree to tree with that. And I had so many good memories with that tree. That tree is still here. But the box elder tree that I just talked about has since passed, and now it's just a stump. But I still have so many great stories about that tree. It's still very special to me, even though it's not still standing up. And I look at that stump occasionally, and I think back to all the times that I used to kick footballs into it. And there are so many special memories with that tree. And so, I'm sure we all have stories about our favorite tree, or maybe if we don't have a favorite tree, we will create stories with those trees. And so, we're gonna learn a little bit about what those stumps mean to us and how they are beneficial to our forest ecosystem. So we're gonna head out this way, and as we head to our next stop, I want you to think about what if your favorite tree was dead or dying? What would you do to it in your yard? Would you cut it down? Would you leave it standing? What would you do to it? So we can head out this way. As we were walking, did anyone come up with, if they had a favorite tree that was dead or dying in their yard, what would you do with it? Did anyone come up with any ideas? Yeah?
I would just cut it down.
You would cut it down? What would you cut it down with?
Probably a saw.
Yeah. Something like this? Yeah. So a chainsaw. So over here, we said we would cut it down with a chainsaw. And so, why do we need a chainsaw? Why do we need chainsaws? We said to cut it down. Why else? These chainsaws, obviously to cut trees down, but they're also really useful tools. And so we can remove trees with chainsaws for restoration purposes, and wildlife purposes, and specifically in this spot, there's one other thing. So we need to remove trees also for safety purposes. So we have this beautiful boardwalk, right, that you're standing on, and we notice that there's a lot of trees down around this boardwalk. Well, the reason for this is actually for safety. And so, obviously the boardwalk costs a lot. It would be a detriment to Schmeeckle, not only in cost, but also in time, based on how many people use this trail, if the boardwalk were to get damaged from a tree. But not only just the boardwalk, it's also for your safety. We're all standing on this boardwalk. I don't think we want to have a tree fall on us right now. That would be pretty bad. So the other thing that we mentioned was also wildlife. Wildlife uses lots of these logs. You might be wondering why the logs are still here. Well, first of all, this is a pretty hard area to access with a truck or some other all-terrain vehicle that could haul these logs out. First of all, they're pretty big. We would have to come back and cut them up so we could even lift them. But also you can see there's kind of like this slope here to random logs. It's really hard to remove some of these stumps and logs. But wildlife is actually a really big beneficiary of these logs. There's actually been studies done that show if you leave logs on the ground, songbird diversity actually increases. And we also have these things, one of my favorite words ever, we can create rabitats with these down logs. And so rabitats, you can see one actually right here. It's not a very big one, but it's just this pile of sticks and logs that rabbits like to run underneath. And so I have an activity and I need 2 volunteers. You wanna help me out?
Sure.
Thank you. So, if you want to look just right over here, is it okay if we go off trail real quick? Can help you down. So, what I want you to do is come right over here and then step down off of the boardwalk. Okay, and then one of you, I want to walk down to the log and then walk back just on the ground. And listen to the noise that it makes. Okay, now walk back. So that was pretty loud, right? Okay, now Evan, if you want to stand on the log over here. There's some bikers coming through. Okay, now walk down the log and then walk back. All right, thank you. Let's give a hand to our volunteers. You can come back up on trail. Thank you. So the purpose of that was it was a lot quieter when they were on top of the logs as compared to when they were on just the ground, right? We all heard that? Yeah. So wildlife like to scoot along the top of those logs like mice and salamanders when predators come out so they don't get hurt. They can still be seen a lot easier, but if they get seen, they'll just run underneath and use that log actually as cover. And so I also have a story that relates to wildlife and safety about this trail. And this story is courtesy of Megan Espy. So there was a man that came into the visitor center. He was really mad about how Schmeeckle was cutting down all of the woodpecker habitat. Woodpeckers really like to use those dead and dying trees because insects are in them and they like to use them as home. It's easier to peck the wood. And so he noticed that all of these trees were down. He came in and he said, Megan, why are you getting rid of all the woodpecker habitat? And what we had to explain is that we're actually not getting rid of all the woodpecker habitat. We are getting rid of the trees next to the trail, not only for the boardwalk safety, but also for our safety. If you actually look just behind you, you can see a lot of dead and dying trees that woodpeckers might use in the future. And I think there's actually some evidence of some woodpecker holes. And so, Schmeeckle really only cuts down trees next to trails unless it's a restoration area. But is it really that attractive to just leave these logs here? Well, let's find out. So I'm gonna have my best eye doctor impersonation. How many people have been to the eye doctor recently? I know I have. So you know that test where they're like, okay, which one is more clear, 1 or 2? And you don't know, you're just like, I think it's 1. Okay, well, I have 2 pictures, and what I want you to think about is which of these pictures is more attractive to you? So we have A and B. Which one is more attractive? Or which one do you like a little bit better? Which one did we like better, A or B? A? I hear a lot of A's.
I like B.
You like B? Yeah, it's all personal preference. Now, next test. You're gonna get everywhere. C or D?
I like D.
You like D?
I like C. Oh, C is
So it's all personal preference, but what did we like better, C or D?
C.
C.
C? I heard a few D's, but mostly C's. So that's interesting. So now, what if I changed it up? Are you more attracted to A or B?
I like A. Me too.
So which one did we like better?
A.
A.
A? I heard a lot of A's. Yeah, so in nature, we typically find more circles, more squiggly lines, rounder edges, not as many corners. But in a more urban and unnatural environment, we find those straight lines, those sharp corners. And so it is all personal preference, but typically people are more attracted to a more natural environment. So, does this also apply here? Are you more attracted to C or D? C.
D.
D. So what did we like better, C or D?
C.
C, yeah. So we typically like a more natural looking stump or a log compared to that cut one. So now we know that this cutting is necessary, especially for our safety and wildlife, but it might not always be the most attractive to us. So we'll look more into that. And so we're gonna head to our next stop. And as we head to our next stop, I want you to think, why else might trees be on the ground? So we are going to be crossing a road pretty quickly here. So let's make sure that we're looking both directions. And we can head out once I pick up my stuff. Okay. So, while we were walking, did anyone think of why else trees might be on the ground other than a chainsaw?
Windstorm.
Windstorm? Any other ideas? Disturbance.
Tornado.
Erosion. Yeah, so what we all just said were forms of disturbance. So, does anyone else know what kinds of disturbance there are? We have windstorm, erosion. What else is there?
Lightning.
Lightning? Yeah, that can definitely be a disturbance. Fire. Flooding, water. Any other ones? What was
Old
that?
age?
Okay. Animals. Animals can definitely be a disturbance, especially in Schmeeckle maybe. But maybe other forms could be tornado. One that we see all the time in Wisconsin is volcanoes. Just kidding. We don't see volcanoes in Wisconsin. But that can be a form of disturbance. So a disturbance is any kind of event that sets back what we call a successional stage. But what's succession? Well, I have an activity. I need 5 volunteers that will help us explain what succession is. With 5 volunteers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. So you can come up here. Okay, so I'm going to give you each a sheet, and if you want to face this way. So what I want you to do is communicate between yourselves and find out which one, starting over here, which site do you think grows the fastest in the earliest stage? So what do we have? We have a grassland, a shrub.
Shrubs.
You're first.
Can I get those instructions
And then
one
me.
more time?
So we are lining up. What plants do you think grows the fastest in the
sure.
earliest stage?
Sure. I don't think it's me.
Here, I'll give you a hint. Over here.
I feel like I'm.
Yeah. So just show you.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Thinking, yeah, ask me.
So we got them lined up correctly. So, when after a major disturbance, we might see something that looks like bare land, especially after those volcanoes that come through Schmeeckle, or big floods, or a roaring fire. We got a biker coming through, so let's just... So after that really big disturbance, we have a bare land. So what we're gonna see is something that grows really fast. And so what grows really fast are grasses, like this. And then after that, the grasses might die and new seeds might come in, and we'll see something like this second picture, which is shrubs and pines and faster growing small trees. But over time, those are also going to die, and they're going to go through the next successional stage and go to the third one. Hold up the third one so everyone can see. Yep. And so those are the really fast growing trees like aspen, and sometimes those scrub oaks, they like to call them. So like those black oaks and pin oaks. But over time, over hundreds of years, those trees are also going to die, and new seed sources are going to come in. And it's going to go to the next one, the fourth one. And so we're going to start seeing more later stage trees come in, like maybe some of those really old white pines or red maple, more likable oaks like those white oaks and red oaks. And even after hundreds of years, maybe even 500 years, we might go into something like the fifth picture, which is those old growth forests. And so we might start to see stuff like sugar maple and hemlock, especially in this area. And that's kind of how succession works. So we start small, we start with those fast growing plants, and then we eventually work our way to get to those larger plants. So what successional stage do you think Schmeeckle is currently in? 4? It looks a lot like that fourth stage to me, kind of that in between 3. We're starting to see some of those faster growing plants dying out. We can see a lot of over mature aspen, which is a really good sign that we are in that fourth stage. Well, what if we had a disturbance right now? What if we had a fire before we got to our old growth stage? What do you think would happen? We would maybe have to start over. Okay, so I can take those sheets back. Let's give a round of applause for our volunteers. Thank you. Thank you. And so, something that's actually really cool about this site is we have seen some minor disturbances. Does anyone know, if you look behind me, what kind of disturbances have come through this area specifically?
Wind shear.
Wind. Yeah. So how do we know that this was from a wind disturbance? We see all of these trees down, and it looks like those root masses got lifted up. But those trees didn't just die on their own. We know that this is from a wind disturbance because every single tree is pointed that way for the ones that are on the ground. If this was due to something else, like if we were cutting these trees, or if there was disease that came through here, we would see trees just toppled all over the place in different directions. But since we only see them going that way, we know that this is from a wind disturbance. And so wind disturbances can sometimes cause something really cool to happen. And we can see here, there's these things called pit and mound microtopography. So what pit and mound topography does is it takes those root masses that the trees have, and since these root masses are so big, some species of trees can even have roots expanding over 2 times the height of the tree. So if there's a 100-foot tree, for some species, those roots might be 200 feet away from the tree. That's pretty cool. They're these big things. But if we get a fast enough and strong enough windstorm, those trees are going to get knocked over, especially if they've been weakened in the past. And so if they bust at the roots, they're actually going to throw up their roots, and that causes pit and mound topography. So, to demonstrate this, I have a Tupperware full of soil, and my fork is going to be a tree. And so the tree is planted in the ground, and these tongs are the roots. And so the tree's planted in the ground. A windstorm is going to come through and pull up that soil with it. And so we can actually see where the tree was. It formed a pit, and on top is the mound. See the pit? So that is something really cool that we might see with a wind disturbance. And we also learned at our last stop that this might actually be more attractive as compared to those cut up logs to some people. And what this wind disturbance allows for is it allows us, if it's not bad enough, to go to a new successional stage. So if it's a bad disturbance, it will set succession back. But sometimes disturbances can be really beneficial to the site. And so, especially in this case, there's lots of new growth that is coming up. If you come here in summer, you can actually see like these 2-inch tall red maple seedlings, and they're really cute. They're so tiny, but they are the new undergrowth that is now going to take over this site. So everywhere you look, disturbances are happening, succession is happening, and a new forest ecosystem is arriving. So, to cap this all off, I wrote a story about what I like to call these sideways stumps. The story is called Sideways Stumps. You can come on through. Thank you. So here it is. I have fallen, but please don't help. It was my time to go. I certainly don't whelp. The forest has a plan, my bark and all. Ask me to speak, I may recall. My bones are achy, my feet do hurt, but now I rest on a foundation of dirt. My life was busier, you could have seen, but now I'm busier and happy as could be. I had a few pets, 3 squirrels to be exact. They had the time of their life. Oh, they were quite a pack. 7 birds and even an owl or 2. But please don't go around yelling boo boo. I was standing, but now I have fallen. I have even more pets now, even though I'm not producing pollen. I live my life as a sideways stump, but don't go around and be a grump. Listen to my stories, even when I'm gone. The regrowth is coming, don't you dare yawn. It is their time now, but please don't forget me. The new ones are ready. It is their time to be a tree. Thank you. So, we are going to now head to our next stop, and as we are walking there, what I want you to think about is what might a downed log or a stump be useful for? So let's think about it as we walk. Okay, so as we were walking, did anyone have any ideas of what a down log or a stump might be useful for? Yeah?
Firewood.
Firewood, yeah, it could be.
It could be used for a house.
A house, yeah, we can use some trees for lumber. Yeah?
Food for insects.
It could be food for insects, so we could just leave them on the ground. Oh, there's a bike coming through. A home for animals, yes. What about what you're sitting on? How about a bench? Yeah, I love to sit on stumps when they're small enough to sit on. And something really cool is this bench. But I've been working at Schmeeckle for the last 2 years, and I've walked past this bench quite a bit, but I just don't know where it came from. How did it just casually get there? I'm so stumped about it. I just don't really know where that log came from. Wait a minute. I think this stump made this log. I can see from the root fibers how they pulled this way. So this tree probably snapped from a wind disturbance. That makes sense. I measured the diameter with my arms really quick. It looks to be about the same size. So I think this log is from this stump. Well, I did a little bit of research into this, and I found out that this tree actually fell about 10 to 12 years ago when there was a really big windstorm that came through Stevens Point. And so what had happened is there was lots of wind damage in this area, and we can especially see it right over here. And instead of just cleaning it all up, some smart people here at Schmeeckle and the maintenance supervisor saw a great opportunity for this log. Instead of removing it and using it for firewood or lumber, something else, why not just make a bench out of it? So that was a really cool opportunity for them. And so we can do a lot of different things with these stumps and logs. So I have a few examples of some art that we can do with these logs. This one's a little more fun. So this is chainsaw art. And so it's basically carving into the wood to create this art form. This one is actually a bench, which is really cool. A little bit more sophisticated than the bench that we're sitting on. But along with this bench and this log, this might be someone's favorite tree. So people have probably sat on this log and just thought, wow, this is a really cool opportunity to just sit and recreate through our beautiful reserve. So this actually might be someone's tree. But this also might have been someone's favorite tree, when it was still standing. And someone was probably really sad when this tree fell. It is right next to the trail. It looks to be a white pine based on the bark that I can see. And it was really big right next to the trail. That's the perfect combination for being someone's favorite tree. But now, since it's down, it still might have been someone's favorite tree, and it always will be, but it provided a new opportunity for stories to be made about someone's favorite tree. So I have another story about, has anyone ever heard of the tree that owns itself? A few people have. There's gonna be a biker coming through, so let's just be aware of that. But the tree that owns itself is a tree in Athens, Georgia. Just one second. You can come on through. Thank you. But it's this tree in Athens, Georgia, and it's been around for over 200 years. And so the story behind it is this was someone's favorite tree over 100 years ago. And this man knew that he was going to die soon. And so as he was writing his will, he did not want anyone to touch that tree because that was his favorite tree. Well, what he did was he wrote in his will that that tree got the deed for the land that it's on. So that tree actually owns itself. And that's really cool. It's only a few square feet of land, but that is that tree's land because that tree was so special to someone that he didn't want that cut down ever. Well, it turns out about 50 years ago, that tree actually fell over because of a windstorm. And something really cool was someone had an original acorn, because it was an oak tree. Someone had an original acorn from that tree, and they planted it where the old tree was, and it actually sprouted up. And so that tree still owns itself since it is the kin of the original tree. This is probably thousands of people's favorite tree just because of the historical relevancy behind it. And that's something really cool. I'm sure we all have our favorite trees, or maybe we don't, but we can change that. And so we all find that special meaning to us. And we create our own stories about that tree. I had my story with that box elder tree, and now it's a stump, but I still know the story of that box elder tree. And so as we are walking back to our start, what I want you to think about is, if you do have a favorite tree, what is the story of that tree? Just something small, 30 seconds or less. I'm going to ask a few of you to share if you're comfortable. But if you're not comfortable, I can always listen to those stories afterwards if you do have them. And if you don't have a favorite tree yet, try to pick one out along the way and listen to that tree for a second. Is it talking to you? Does it have a story? Try to come up with a story. Why is it your favorite tree? Why'd you pick that tree? And so we can head back to the start and let's think about that. Okay, so we made it back to Mr. Maple, someone that I have so many stories with, but I want to hear someone else's story. Does anyone want to volunteer to share a quick story about their favorite tree? Yeah?
I've got a maple in the back of my house. It's probably about 50 or 60 years old, so it's really old. And it was the climbing tree at my house, so I had a ladder at one point up there. We've had a swing. I would hang my hammock. I would read. It was the hangout tree in the backyard.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of us all have our favorite tree, Or maybe you don't have a favorite tree yet, but I'm sure you will find one at some point in your life. Or maybe your tree has even been gone for years. But the point is, we all have stories about those trees. And we make connections to those trees even well after those trees are gone or we're not around those trees. And so we know that those trees can get there for many different reasons, and they can be on the ground for many different reasons, whether that be safety or restoration or for wildlife reasons. And that's for unnatural and natural reasons. But it doesn't really matter because we all have those connections. And they remind us of what was there at one point. So, are you going to still listen to those trees? Well, I encourage you all to find your favorite tree. Your tree might be in Schmeeckle, it might be at your yard, it might be in your childhood home. Maybe you don't have a favorite tree yet, but go out and find one. Sit on a log or a stump and just listen. Listen to their stories and try to come up with stories of your own about that tree. So the stories that you make are always special to you. And I encourage you all to make that tree as happy as it can be, because in turn, it will also make you happy. And so that concludes our program. If you have any other stories that you want to tell me, I will be available after. The trails are still open in Schmeeckle, so if you want to go and find your favorite tree, I encourage you to do that. Otherwise, the parking lot is right over there, and thank you for coming.